Hi, welcome to the Casella Homes Podcast. And this is where we navigate the intricate world of real estate and empower you with knowledge that matters. So, I'm your host, Sandy, and today we're diving into legal matters and legal aspects of a real estate transaction. So, whether you're a seasoned investor or a first time buyer, understanding the legal framework is really important. And this can make a real difference in your transaction. And today's episode is titled "Real Estate and the Law," and this is a guide for buyers and sellers. And we have an expert in the field today that I'm talking to, Barbara Frederici from Fieldstone Law. And Barbara and I have been doing work together for a number of years. She handles the majority of our transactions. She handles personal transactions for us as well. And I think it's very important that you have a trusted lawyer that's doing it, a trusted and knowledgeable lawyer. So thank you so much for joining me today, Barbara. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Thanks. So let's jump right into it. So, um, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the key concepts that I think that buyers and sellers need to understand when they're doing a real estate transaction. And what would you say are the most important aspects of what they need to know?
Well, one of the key things is understanding that you're signing a legal agreement. So, this is a legally binding agreement that you're entering into. This is not a discussion with somebody. Once it's signed, it's signed. So, make sure that it is a complete agreement. Make sure that you've got whatever it is that you need in that agreement, that it's in there. But part of that is the work that comes ahead of time of making sure that you're getting the deal that you want. So, making sure that you have done your research as to what it is that you're getting into. Are you, as you said, are you a first time home buyer? Are you an investor? What is it that you're trying to do? What is your timeline? Is this your forever home? Is this a home that you're going to flip in a couple of years? And making sure that you have full and frank conversations with your trusted advisors. So, with your agent. So, making sure that your agent understands your goals, because if your agent doesn't understand your goals, they are not going to be able to find you the property that is going to meet those needs.
Yeah, that's really really important. I think even especially now in this market where we've come out of COVID and the market has changed drastically, it's really important to have experience on your side. I think on both sides, on the realtor side of it as well as on the lawyer side of it is really important. How do you feel about that?
100%. A deal can be made much more smooth if you have experience on your side. So you have somebody who has either the experience themselves, or they've got people on their team that have the experience that they can call upon to make sure that things always happen. There are always some little hiccups. Some are little, some are bigger. But if you don't have the experience, if nobody has ever gone through these things, it can be a much more difficult process to manage. So, as you say, changing markets, like if nobody's ever gone through the change of market, they don't know how to properly deal with the situation. Are you in a buyer's market? Are you in a seller's market? What are the trends? Where do we see things going? So somebody with that experience, on the realtor side, for sure, somebody with that experience is going to help you navigate those, is going to help you plan and make your process hopefully smooth. And then on the legal side, things happen all the time. If you're dealing with somebody who this is their first real estate deal, they're not going to know what what things are possible, how you navigate these bumps in the road. So experience on both sides is very, very important.
Yeah, and it seems like I think this year especially there's been a lot of just little hiccups in deals that we've done. And like you say, some of them are not really major, but you do need to be aware of them. Closing dates or people not having the funds on time. Just little things that seem to have been kind of been putting delays on things, and you really have to know how to navigate these, how to handle these, and what's a major red flag and what's a not a major red flag. So in terms of the contract, like when you're signing a contract, like whether that's I guess a BRA or those kind of things would be more along the lines of our licensing body. But if you're signing a purchase agreement or a listing agreement, what are the major things when you're buying a property that buyers need to let's look at buyers. What are the major things that buyers need to look out for in that agreement of purchase and sale?
So one, I think, is being realistic as to what the clauses mean and what they're trying to achieve. So if you're buying a property and it's as is where is, you need to understand what that means. That means that they are not telling you anything about the property. Now, there are some legal obligations that they have about disclosure. So if there is a known hidden defect, they can't hide hide that because it's hidden. You don't have a way of discovering it. But generally speaking, in real estate, it's buyer beware. So you need to do your own due diligence. But um, again, understanding what it is that you're trying to achieve. So when you have clauses that are included in the agreement of purchase and sale, so the agreement has, of course, the main body, the standard form items that are in there, and then there's always a schedule, and you can put things in the schedule. So what are you trying to achieve with the schedule, and being realistic about those things? So one clause that we see all the time, and it causes a little bit of angst, I think, for people is, all appliances are going to be in good working order. Well, good working order is, it depends on your point of view. For the seller, they're in good working order. For the buyer, are they in good working order? Probably, maybe not. But if they're not, what is it that you want to do? So, what are you trying to achieve with that clause? You're probably trying to achieve that you're not getting something that is completely unworkable. Are you going to get a brand new appliance that has been recently serviced? You're probably not getting that either. So, being realistic about what it is that you're getting with those clauses and what you're trying to achieve with them.
Yeah, and I typically, the way I usually explain that to a buyer is they should be in the same condition or very similar condition to when you saw them. So if it's a 10-year-old stove, you're getting that 10-year-old stove. That's not, it's in working condition. So I think that's where sometimes confusion comes in. If people swap things out, then it becomes an issue. If they swap something out for something better, it's never a problem. But if they swap it out for something older, then it obviously is a problem.
Yeah,
So
but part of that is even testing. So we will tell people, like, turn the taps on, try to run the dishwasher or the wash. Do things to test those things. Like, you need to do your own due diligence to have some idea as to what that means. But yeah, if you're getting a 10-year-old washer, is it going to last for the next 10 years? Probably not. So being realistic about those things.
yeah. What would you say the next major, like biggest thing to look out for? I'm trying to think of things that I think you're right. It's mostly just what is your objective here, and what are you looking for, right? I think sometimes one of the biggest issues that I see is people go in and see a house that's staged or all prettied up, and they're looking at the way it's decorated when people see it, and they're not looking at the bigger picture. And I think that's where experience comes in as well as what are the major issues? Because this furniture is not going to be here when you move in. And I think that sometimes causes some problems. So um, I think for me, that's a big part that people have to understand that you're buying the bricks and mortar and you're not buying the furnishing that's in there. And that seems to lead to problems. Have you found that, or is that not really, is that more on the realtor side, would you say?
I would say that's probably more on the realtor side, because you guys deal with that part of it. We deal more with the legal aspect. So making sure that you're getting what you purchased. But again, taking a look around, for example, in a condo, are you getting parking spaces? Are you not getting parking spaces? You have to do your research and to know what it is that, or have experience on your side to know what it is that you're, um, what is included as part of the unit. Is there a storage locker? Is there no storage locker? So sometimes, you hear from a friend, this is what they have in theirs. That doesn't mean that this is what is going to be happening at your new location. So understand it, like, is there a shared driveway? What does that mean? Is there um, are there easements across the property? So easements would allow somebody else to cross over the property. What exactly does that mean? And again, part of it is, if you have certain goals that you're trying to achieve, like if you want to put a pool in the backyard, that's information that you need to let everybody know. And you might need to do more due diligence on the forefront. If you're good with buying it the way it is and everything, that the way it looks is fine. And again, bricks and mortar, not the furniture that's inside. But if you're comfortable with all of that, then that's a little bit different than if you're planning on doing major renovations. If you're doing major renovations, you have to know what's kind of behind the scenes. You have to, you know, be be proactive in letting the people who are on your team know what you're going to do with it so that they can then make the inquiries that need to be made to ensure that you're going to achieve those goals.
Yeah, that's a good point, I think, with letting the people on your team know what your goals are, right? Because that's the only way that we can really help you if we know. And if we know that you want to put a pool, if we know that that's something that you want to do, or put a garage or something like that, then there's more due diligence involved than just asking the seller, because that's not buyer beware. That's right. In my opinion, like, the
Yeah.
seller may think you can do these things and may have no idea that you can't. And that's, I think, a lot where the experience comes in, where you have to know what are the proper channels to go through to find out whether you can do some of these things. So if you're in a basic subdivision, it's some things are a little bit easier, but when it's a little bit outside, the boxes, then that's where you have to know, how do you do your due diligence and find out exactly what you need to do. You can't just ask the listing agent, or you can't just ask the seller, because sometimes they don't know and they'll give you information that is not correct.
And not legally binding. So from a legal perspective, what they tell you is absolutely not legally binding. If it's in the agreement and they're representing these things, it may be legally binding, but again, understanding what legally binding means. Legally binding doesn't have fairy dust that sprinkles over it and makes things happen magically. Legally binding means that you have a remedy if that thing is untrue. So if you bought this dream home thinking that you're going to tear it down and build a pool in the backyard, and you haven't, and they've, even if you've put in a representation that the seller says, yes, it is, the setbacks or this, or, whatever it is, and that happens to not be true, your remedy doesn't make it, there's nobody that can do anything to make it happen. What happens is the court, and it would be a court action, you go to court and the court would say, well, here's what you lost because what they said is untrue, and here are your damages. So you can get compensated for it, but it doesn't always put you back in that same position. So that's again part of your due diligence of making sure that you understand what you're getting, what are your goals with all of this, and making sure that your team knows what that is so that they can do the due diligence on their part and that you're not blindly relying on something that somebody else said.
Yeah. What do you think, for sellers? What do you think the most important thing for sellers to watch out for in an agreement is?
Not overpromising. So, um, and again, these things are all market dependent. So it's very different if you're in a buyer's market versus a seller's market. So, like right now, it is much more of a buyer's market. So the sellers don't have as much sway as they did back in COVID when it was totally a seller's market and sellers could put in anything that they wanted. So, if you're, because we're in a buyer's market, the seller may have to put in more things, but when whatever you're putting in, make sure you can do it. So if you're saying that the appliances are in good working order, don't leave with the washing machine all in pieces. Just like try to abide by the contract, do what you're supposed to do. Now, in terms of repairs or things that need to be done, and these are issues that often arise after people have had a home inspection. So they have the home inspection, and the home inspector says, oh, here are the things that need to be repaired. Understanding that your interest as a buyer is very different than the interest of a seller. So, what does the seller need to do to repair it? They aren't as interested in making it a fulsome, long lasting repair as the buyer may be. So, requiring the seller to repair things may not give you what you're trying to achieve. Now, on the buyer's side, the buyer might say, "Well, I'll repair it myself, and I'll ask for an abatement in the purchase price." You may not get it, so there's compromise and negotiation. And again, this is where having an experienced realtor on your side helps, because that's what they do. They negotiate. They go through all of this and say, "Okay, we need this. You want to do that," and you come to an agreement that hope probably will be somewhere in the middle. Nobody usually gets everything that they want. So you have to be willing to have some give and take, but hopefully at the end of the day, it will achieve your goals.
Yeah, I think in my experience, and I've been doing this a long time, most buyers and most sellers just want a fair deal. I have yet to come across a deal where the seller has thought they've taken advantage of the buyer and won, or the buyer has felt like they've taken advantage of the seller and won something. right? In most cases, people just want a fair deal, and that's typically what happens. Everybody feels like it worked out well, and that's the part that I love about this business. I think that that's what most people want. What I have noticed is sometimes with buyers when they're putting an offer in on a house, especially when this goes both ways during COVID when it was a seller's market or a buyer's market. When one or the other negotiates so hard that the other person feels like they maybe, you know, it wasn't fair. I don't know how you would say that, but maybe not a fair deal. Then they come back and ask for something. The other party is more likely to say no. And I've seen that. I've seen that happen where buyer has been so hard on the price and so adamant, and it comes down to a few $1,000s, and the seller accepts the offer, and then the buyer wants to change the closing date and the seller says no, can't do
Yep.
that.
Yep.
So I think it's always, if everybody bargains in good faith, I think that's the best thing. Because then when something comes up later and you have to ask for something, the other party is more likely to work with you on that. So I mean, that's just my take on that in reality. That's what I see.
Well, and ideally, everybody's wanting to achieve a common goal. As a seller, you're trying to sell your property. As the buyer, you're trying to buy the property. So that goal of transferring ownership is a common goal. So yeah, like you say, hopefully, if you negotiate in good faith, everybody can achieve their goal. It's harder when somebody is not, you know, we've seen reluctant sellers, and those things happen. And again, this is where experience comes into play because if you've got a reluctant seller, there may be other factors involved that the professionals on the team can figure out how are we going to navigate this? How are we going to get around this? How are we going to make sure that this deal um, gets over the finish line?
Yeah. The biggest question, and I'll ask you what maybe the biggest question you get is, but the biggest question I get, I think, from sellers and buyers, mostly sellers, is what happens if this deal doesn't close? And I've had in 35 years selling real estate, you would have seen this more than me, but in 35 years of selling real estate, I've only seen one deal that didn't close where we had to resell the house. So it doesn't happen all that often. I know it could happen, but that's one of the biggest questions I get from buyers is or sellers is what happens if the deal doesn't close? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it definitely a tricky situation. I mean, as lawyers, our goal is to try to y- litigation is should be your last resort. So you
Yeah.
never want to put your client in a position where the only option left is for them to go to court and try and get whatever damages, get a remedy. So everybody is motivated to get the deal done, especially because like right now, if somebody can't buy your property, if you've entered into an agreement of purchase and sale, and that the we come to closing date and that purchaser is unable to purchase, you're not guaranteed to get the damages that you think you would have gotten. And the cost of getting there is expensive. So everybody is motivated to try and get the deal over the finish line. So yeah, in terms of trying to deals not closing, I mean, there are some situations we've actually got one right now that we've got fingers crossed that we're going to get it over the finish line. But again, I this one I attribute to unfortunately having an agent that was not. This is obviously not one of your people, Sandy, but an agent who was not as well versed in the market and how to deal with this property. Because our clients bought and they bought a bit high and they sold a bit low, but the sale was very conditional. Like it was nightmare after nightmare after
Wow.
nightmare. And luckily I attribute my team to being able to get this done, that we were able to work with all of the parties to get this hopefully over the finish line this week. But it's been a struggle and it was unnecessarily stressful. Again, I think because of the lack of experience of the agent, because they didn't know how to navigate the situation properly.
Yeah, that is so important. Like I can't stress how important that is to have a team that I see a lot of people and I don't, I think realtors work really hard. Lawyers work really hard as well. I think on the realtor side, using somebody that has another full-time job, that's a problem for me. I just don't in my personal opinion, I don't think that should be allowed. I mean, I think everybody should have the opportunity to get a real estate license and do that business if they want. However, this is a full like, this is more than a full-time job, and having a full-time job where you can't answer the phone during the day, and I've seen that so many times with realtors I've worked with, and I can't get a hold of them during the day. They'll only maybe text me back or, it becomes evident that they have a full-time job. I think that's a real disservice to this is a big deal. Like, buying a property and closing a property and selling a property is a big deal, and I think that if people don't have the right team in place, same on the lawyer side, I've seen where the lawyers won't do anything, don't answer calls, like, won't give advice, won't, follow up on things. It's really a problem for buyers and sellers. I think you really need to have somebody who's on your side and has that experience. I remember during or just after COVID ended, and there were a lot of realtors who'd never seen a waiver, did not know how to, didn't know how to do a waiver, had never done a conditional deal in their lives. And now it's really important. There are things that you need to look out for that, I can rely on experience back, in selling. This is a more normal market to me. This is typically the type of market I've always sold real estate in, other than the last few years where it was super hot. But knowing the things to look out for, and not always taking the best offer. It's not always about the best offer. Getting $2,000 or $3,000 more, and you have to worry whether a deposit check's going to come in or whether it's going to close. It's just not worth it. And I think people get so hung up on that. And I've had issues where we've had multiple offers and the seller has not taken the highest offer, and the other agent has a fit. And they're like, what do you mean? Why would they? You do not have to take the highest offer. Plain and simple. A seller takes whichever offer. It's about everything. It's about the terms. It's about everything, not just the price. So that's really important. What do you think in terms of the biggest question that you get about buying or selling? What would that be? Would you recall off the top of your head?
I don't know, but one of the questions that always comes up is what time do I need to be out? And this is
Yes,
this
that's
is
a
one.
big one.
If we could change the standard form to say when closing can be, because closing is when the deal closes. Closing is when that registration happens. It can happen, I'll say 9 in the morning. Very rarely it happens at 9 in the morning, but as soon as that deed is registered, the other party owns that property. So when we have people who say, "Oh, I'm going to move out at 8 o'clock tonight," I'm like, "No, you can't move out at 8 o'clock tonight. The deal closed at 2. They own You're now trespassing."
Yeah,
Now, if you have like sometimes parties can talk to each other, and this is part of, I think, what you were saying earlier, Sandy, about, if you've drawn hard lines in the sand and you've been a very difficult person to negotiate with, you're not going to get any leeway. But if you've been a decent person throughout the process and you need a little bit of extra time, maybe the parties can negotiate that. In my world, my preference is, let's not do that. Let's, like, when it's done, it's done. Have your stuff out, be gone. Um, one of the biggest issues I see is buying and selling on the same day. When I see those deals come in, I uh, I worry about them because there's no guarantee that everything has to happen perfectly. And if you are in a line of dominoes, you don't know where you are in that line. So if you've got three people before you who are also buying and selling on the same day, you may not get your sale done until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you don't then have time to do the purchase. So, like, plan for contingencies, make plans. Don't, like, spend the little bit extra on getting bridge financing if you have to, or keep your stuff in storage for a night or two and go in a hotel. Do have some kind of plan rather than buying and selling on the same day. Or if you're going to buy and sell on the same day, still have a plan for what if things don't work out. Because although we have had, I think, one that I know of where it just totally, it was like the perfect storm of, um, the mortgage funds didn't come in. Um, Stuff was on the moving truck. The movers were booked the next day. So everything had been loaded, then it had to be unloaded, then it had to be reloaded the next day. I had to find a different mover the next day. Like, it was the perfect storm of what could go wrong. But while it doesn't happen often, don't be the one that it happens to. Make your
yeah.
plans so that you can. It's a stressful time. It's probably one of the biggest purchases you're going to make. It's one of the most stressful times in your life. Don't add extra stress by making things unrealistic by trying to do, for example, a buy and sell on the same day.
Yeah, I think people underestimate the stress of moving. They really do. The whole thing is stressful. Like, putting your house for sale, selling it, buying it, all of it is stressful. And then to add to that stress. So, like you said, you're absolutely right. Try not to close on the same day. We always try to encourage people to do a bridge finance and maybe close the house you're buying a few days earlier, because you're
Yeah.
right, you never know. And we get that a lot as well, where people will say, well, what time do I get my keys? And it I have we have nothing to do with that. As a realtor, we don't have anything to do with that. It's got to go through the lawyer.
Yep.
And a lot of times I get calls like constantly during the day. Well, can you tell the lawyer to give me my keys? I'm like, no, I can't. It has
And
to close.
yeah, and we don't have control of that either. So if we're getting
Right.
mortgage, so we think of the number of players that are involved. So we need to get the money from the lender. So everything needs to be signed. We need to get all that information to the lender. Often lenders on the last minute will have other things that they want, or they've got, if they've got 100 different closings on that same day, you're not necessarily going to get looked at first thing in the morning. So we need to get the money. And then once we get the money, then we need to get it over to the other side. We need to make sure that all the documents are in order. There are a lot of steps involved that I think people just think, oh, it's closing day. And like we kind of, again, like sprinkle the magic fairy dust and things just happen. But there's a lot of steps along the way that, we control what we control, but there's so many things that are out of our control in terms of timing.
Yeah. I wonder where that timing came from. I remember it used to be 11:59, I think, that it closed. And then it used to be 6 p.m. And it's a hard concept to get a buyer or a seller to understand that it closes when it closes. So best case scenario, you're out the day before. Is
Yes.
that best case scenario? Because you don't know. You could have, like you say, you could have your movers coming at 2 and the deal closes at 11. And now you don't legally own that house anymore. It's a
Yeah.
problem.
And like we've seen it too, where you've shown the movers what it is that you've got in your house, but they've estimated what the size of truck they're going to need, and oops, they made a mistake, and now they need to send the truck back, or they need a second truck, and so it's going to be delayed. Like there's so many things that you can't control on that day. So control the things that you can, plan for the things that you can't, but have a plan. And there, one of the advantages that we have now that we didn't have, say, 30 years ago is the internet. So you can Google these things and you can get information. Again, this is where experience comes into play, because ideally you have these questions. Ask the questions, ask your realtor, and ask the questions early. Plan early. Don't leave things to the last minute, because if it's a last minute thing, we may not be able to deal with it. But if we have enough runway, we can usually work things out. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And so just a question I just came to my mind thinking about with, just with the way prices are and real estate being so much more expensive, I can see where in the future there will be more, let's say, joint ownership, not necessarily with us with spouses, which is pretty typical, but let's say family members or even friends who buy a property together. Like,
yep.
what would be do you see that happening in the future, maybe with just because of the pricing?
Well, we see it now, especially with younger people. Usually, mom or dad, or somebody has to go on the mortgage to help them qualify. And part of the thing that people don't always appreciate is that if mom is on your property as a 1% owner, so that they're only on just to try and help you qualify for the mortgage. If you default on that mortgage, mom is not only responsible for 1%, they're responsible for the whole thing. So um, these percentages, and what I'm talking about is, there's good reasons that we put people on for low percentages, that we put parents on for a low percentage. What that means is that in terms of your principal residence, it's the people that live there. Ideally, it's their principal residence. So there's some tax consequences or tax benefits by doing it that way. But I think not all parents understand that once you sign that mortgage agreement, you're committed to the full amount of that mortgage. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that if you have multiple children and you're signing off for one, you may not have enough equity, you may not have enough credit to be able to sign off for somebody else. So if you're thinking of co-signing for somebody on their home, ask the questions about what are your plans for the future. Are you going to sign for child number 2 and child number 3 as well? Because you better make sure that you've got the credit to do that, or the timeline as to when the children are going to qualify for the mortgage themselves to see whether or not you're going to have the room to do that.
That's a good point. I never thought of that. I think that's important that you look at those different ways. I don't want to get too detailed into like joint tenancy and all that. I think that would be another whole other discussion. However, I think it's important to know what you're getting yourself into if you're doing that. If you're buying a property with another person, whoever that person is, especially, those things are really important. I've seen where that's caused issues in the past because what people don't understand is that guess what? Mom's on title, mom has to sign off,
Yeah.
right? If you're selling this property, she has to sign the listing agreement, she has to sign the agreement of purchase and sale. All of that stuff has to be done. I saw that cause problems years ago with two brothers that moved here, but um, and people do weird things sometimes later on
It,
down the road. So
yeah. And families have fallings out.
mhm,
So, you want to be sure that if you're signing off that you try, you're signing for your child, you want to be sure that you understand what that means down the road. And as a child, if you've had your parents sign, they have a right to certain information. Like you're bound, um, maybe longer than you thought you were.
yeah. What else do you think is important for people to do when they're buying? So now let's say you're a young couple and you've just bought your first house. In my opinion, once you've bought that house, now you need to start looking. And I know you do all of this, like the a will and all of those things that go along with it, insurance, life insurance, whatever that is, to make sure that you're protecting that investment. Because if something, God forbid, happens to one person, you need to know how this is all going to work out. So I think that is really important that people also, if they're buying the house, also talk to you as well about those type of things, like how do we protect ourselves? Do we have a will? What's going to happen if something goes wrong here? So
Yeah, and being aware of the like all of the financial implications that are involved. So understanding that when you're, for example, when you're buying, you're not just paying the purchase price, you're also paying land transfer tax. You have to pay legal fees. There's going to be insurance costs. What other things do you have? And you should plan for those things. You should plan to have a will. You should plan to have uh, if you've got if something happened to you, how are you going to make those mortgage payments? So insurance maybe is part of that conversation, and maybe that adjusts what it is that you're looking for in terms of pricing to make sure that you can afford all of those other things. Now, ideally, people's incomes go up, but you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're so stretched that if there is something that happens, that you can't deal with it.
yeah, yeah, very true, very true. This has been really informative. I think there's a lot of things that people don't understand when they're buying, and the importance of making sure that all of these you have all of these questions. We typically with a buyer ask a lot of questions up front, and sometimes buyers, I'll be honest, sometimes they get upset and they're, why are you asking me all these questions? Well, we can't properly represent you if we don't know, just like you said in the beginning, if we don't know what your ultimate goal is. You're a young couple. Okay, are you planning to have kids? And if you are, when? How far away do you work from work? How far away do you want to live from work? How far are you willing to commute? All of these things are super important. And sometimes people get upset. They think we're asking, prying too much into their business. But it's really important to make sure that you get into a property that, like you said, you're not in over your head. You're not just going to work to pay your mortgage and the other things that come along with it. So I think it's been really informative, and yeah. Is there anything else that you think is important for buyers or sellers to know when they're getting themselves into a real estate transaction, whether that be first time buyers or if they're moving down? I mean, there's a whole other segment of now of parents, elderly parents selling their houses, and people taking, the kids having to take care of that for them. So there's a whole gamut there, but that's probably for another day. But what else would you say is most important for people to understand?
I think just understanding the process. So inform yourselves, like look, like Google things, ask questions. I know we always say there's no stupid questions. If you think it's a stupid question, ask it anyway, because you're better off to ask it and have the answer than to be in a situation, go, oh, I really wish I'd asked whatever. So ask the questions, inform yourself, rely on the people that you've got in your circle find a circle that is trustworthy. So a circle that has the experience, that has the knowledge, that is accessible. As you said, if you've got somebody that's not answering the phone, that's not really helpful for you. I know for us, what we do is we have a memo that we send to people before we start our transaction to give them information about what the process looks like so that if they have questions, ideally, and we revise our memo from time to time because sometimes things come up, but our memo should answer a lot of the questions that people have. And yeah, working with trusted people. Again, I just think knowledge is key.
Yeah. What else besides the real estate transaction do you handle for buyers or sellers?
So, like you said, we do the wills and estates. We also do corporate commercial matters. So, anybody who's got a business or if they've got questions about a business, any contract reviews, those types of things. But for most home buyers, like the next big thing to do, part of your financial plan, part of being financially literate is making sure that you have a will and power of attorney. And it's important for people to understand. I know a lot of people come in and say, oh, we're married. Well, we're not really married. We're just common law, but it's all the same. It is not the same. It is not the same at law. It is especially not the same when you're talking about succession planning or wills. So super important for people to have a will, especially if they are in a common law relationship.
Interesting. Okay. We will put your contact details, your email and your phone number. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that people are welcome to reach out to you if they
Yeah.
have questions about buying or selling or when they are buying or selling. I mean, I know I strongly suggest all of our clients to go through your firm because I know that the process is going to be handled smoothly every single time. And I know that when problems come up, there's always good communication there and you're able to help people navigate that process. So we will
And,
put that information there.
and similarly on our side, we love when a deal comes in from you because we know that we've got an experienced realtor who's dealt with issues and it's a good agreement that you draft. It's an agreement that doesn't lead to as many problems as when you've got somebody who's less experienced and doesn't fully understand what it is that they're putting in that agreement.
Yeah, we do our best. It's such an emotional business on our side, just, and it's people are always shocked to hear. I mean, we lose sleep a lot of times when people are buying or selling because we're so invested in the process. And, how now, one last thing I'm going to ask you, and then we'll wrap it up is buying real estate, having a house, home ownership is really scary for a lot of people. And there are pitfalls. How But I also know that it also is one of the best ways for people to create wealth for themselves or stability for themselves, and that's why I'm so passionate about it. What do you think in terms of buying? Is it a good idea knowing all the risks that are involved in home ownership? Is it a good idea?
It is as long as you're in the right price point. So I do have one friend who said, you have to stretch yourself and buy as much as you can buy. Depends on your circumstance. And I think it makes a difference if you have somebody else that you can rely on, that if things get sticky, that you've got somebody else who can help, pick up those pieces. But if, you know, again, plan for the contingencies. What if you're out of work for a couple of months? Do you have the money to cover those mortgage payments? What if there's a major repair? Have you planned for those things? And the plan might be extra credit. Do you have extra credit? Like what situation are you in? So make sure that you're well versed in what your situation is. Plan for, if the interest rates change. I think that's one of the challenges that people had during COVID is we were in a historically low interest rate period, and now those mortgages are coming up for renewal. Can you still afford the payments? That's a big deal. So understanding those things, planning for those things, and being realistic.
Yeah. And you have to know your client, I think, in terms of what their risk tolerance is. I mean, they ask that question when you buy stocks. I think it's the same for real estate. There are some people who, I always say to people, if variable rate, typically you're going to pay less interest over the life of a mortgage if you have a variable rate. I've always taken a variable rate mortgage, but I understand the fluctuations. Listen, if you may pay a little bit more interest if you go with a fixed rate, But if you can't sleep at night because your payments may change, then don't go that route. Don't do that to yourself. If you're the type of person that you want, you want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, you have your budget, stick to your budget. It's really important. You have to know yourself and don't put yourself under so much stress no matter what happens. Like, people sometimes get caught up in the buying process, but stick to what you are comfortable with, what you can live with, and what's not going to cause you to lose sleep at night, because it's just not worth it if that happens.
So just sorry, one other thing that I want to add in is
Absolutely.
buyers who are buying as an investment. So being realistic about what you're buying. So if you're buying as an investment, like you said, if you're going to your financial advisor, they're going to talk about your risk tolerance. You have to be realistic about what that investment means. Are you willing to be a landlord? Are you willing to get the calls in the middle of the night? What if your tenant leaves? What if your tenant damages the place? So, you know, buying because my neighbor down the road said this was a really good investment, like, you need to do your due diligence. You need to understand what it is that you're getting into and be prepared for those risks and plan it out. And
Yeah,
it can be a good thing for people, but you have to be willing to put the work in.
100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And we're seeing that now with the condo market and all the sales that were done, and people bought them because they're told they're going to make money. And, you know,
Yep.
it's
Or
really sad.
new builds.
Yeah.
People who buy new build homes thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna flip it because,
Right.
you know, a year ago it sold at this." Not
Yeah.
necessarily the case, and you have to be able to have that risk tolerance.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Barbara. I really appreciate you joining me here. And like I said, we will add your contact info here, and feel free to reach out. Like I said, we've been working with Barbara for a long time, and her staff are fantastic. And I never have any issues. I always know that things are going to go as smooth as possible. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Amazing. Thank you, Sandy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.